Okay, so hello everyone. Let's get to it. Today's talk is about so wrong. Uh, we are trying to do perfectly normal things in abnormal ways, and so try and see how far we can stretch our understanding of a concept. Um, I am Arjun, and I will be walking you through these examples. So we already know how to do these things. These are things that we do every day in office, in our hobbies, in the creative projects that we write. But by doing them in strange ways, maybe we can learn something new, right? For example, let's say you want to tell someone that they owe you 819 rupees, but there are restrictions. The common way would be you just text them or you verbally tell them that you owe 819. But there is restriction that you have to count on your hands, and you cannot number down or cannot write numbers on your hands and show it to them. Then that concept comes in that how creative can you get while trying to express this number? And something very few people realize is you can actually count up till at least 1,000 on your hands itself without any extra equipment. So one way to do this, you use your fingers as pieces and you use the binary number system. Okay. Uh, okay, cool. Continue. So one way to show people numbers is instead of using your normal is it better now? Okay,
Share
I'm
your
just going
screen
to
first.
assume it's better. Yeah. Mm, okay, screen should be like, hopefully audio is also. Okay, so I'm just going to continue with that. So one way to do this is to have a binary representation on your hands and just people the representation and you can express with this. So when we come to code, what are the weird things or what are the normal things that we can do in weird ways? For example, web frameworks has worked. And what we can do is turn something completely routine, which is either using a decorated function or have a class which is there and have a function inside that have a member function inside that class which is decorating or you can say which is handling the entire request. What if you cannot use classes and you cannot use functions? How do you still manage to do this? How do you still manage to serve requests without using these two uh, major parts of the language. What about for loops? Can you write APIs inside for loops? And it reads very well. For request and response in get something, do this. So just take a minute, look at this code, and take a minute to say, ki, nahi, this is wrong, this should not happen, right? But this can happen, and we have to do a little bit of tweaking, but we can make this happen. So how do we do this? Just jump into the code now. This repository is there on GitHub. You can check it out and take a look at what's going on. So the web code is fairly simple. We have a server which is written like this. We define an application function, and then we just define loops inside that, and we run the application. Since the goal was just to write the roots in for loops, this works perfectly fine, right? So we can demo that quickly. Python server, and then we have a client script. Client is very simple. It just hammers the server with these two requests, robot and hello. And once we run that, we see that, yeah, sure, they're getting requests working, right? There are a bunch of errors because of how this was implemented, but who cares, as long as it is implemented. So this is one of these weird things we can do with Python, asynchronous code. We can write complete roots inside for loops, and this, but the people should be punished for doing this, right? So let's see if we can learn something with this later on. Okay, when you're writing web applications, eventually at some point, everything becomes SQL or some other sort of database. SQL being the most prevalent right now, uh, this is just fine, right? And most ORMs have got some sort of method where you can execute a single string, but or you can have an ORM object chain, which call chain, which gets translated into a string. But can we do it without writing custom classes and without writing strings? Uh, for example, if you were using an ORM, like the entry objects all thing, you would need to define at least the entry class, right? Without that, you cannot use that ORM. And here you would at least need to define the string, without which you cannot use that. Can we do something in Python where using native Python code, we write SQL? So this is the evil code from SoWrong. Turns out you can write SQL uh, without ever defining custom values. You just write these things, right? And like before, let's just go and look at the code. So we have the ORM here. The code is fairly simple. Uh, you have normal Python being written like this, and you just run that function. So you write a function, you write something like this, and you can run it, right? And the way we can test this is Python server. Oh, I'm still in web, sorry. Python code. So here, the first one, let's actually reorganize this. Yeah. So let's say we have the code here, right? When we run this thing, the first one gets translated into actual SQL. The second one gets translated into this, right? Uh, the second one actually just inserts the values, and then there is nothing when we select from here. And then when we do select again, there is a value which is here, right? So this is running against, I think, SQLite, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, this is running against SQLite in memory. So we create the table, show the table, insert, and then show again, and that's how this runs, right? So that's another very strange way of writing uh, code. What is actually happening is that this entire thing is an annotation, and in Python, annotations are only parsed; they are not evaluated. So you can get away with not defining these things as long as they parse correctly. It's fine. So that's one other wrong way of doing things. And then you have this one, like people have said, there are hard problems in computer science, right? You have this problem where you have long running tasks and you need to serve those tasks over some short network request. So, how do you do that? Typically, you hand off that task to some sort of broker, and then it gets handled by a worker in the background, and then it comes back, and then your request is complete. But what if you had to stay in the same process and you cannot change to an async server and you cannot change the person who's calling your API? How do you do that? How do you go from something like this to something like this, right? Can you modify an existing API in some way so that you can have long running tasks without needing to add a, a a job queue to your architecture or changing the way your client calls the code? This is obviously very bad. Please do not do this. This is just for fun's sake. Right? Turns out you can do it. The magic being maximum redirection. So, what you can, this code example actually I could not finish. I think uh, server. So that's what you have. And the idea is that after doing a chunk of task, you redirect to the same API. And by doing that, what you can do is get rid of the timeout issue. So here we have that batch function. It just redirects to the same API, uh, allowing you to jump out of that timeout error and then come back again. So there's no demo for this one. Finish it in time. So this is another weird thing that you can do. You should not do, but it works. Right? This is how you introduce more bugs than you solve problems. Right? Okay. So looking at all these things which are really really strange, what can we learn? So for example, in the for loop system, clearly defining your thoughts leads to exposed faults. You can actually expose faults by clearly defining the problem. That is where the whole agenda of systems like TLA plus comes in, right? For example, you cannot decorate a loop. Once a loop is written, it is written. There is no way to modify an existing loop which is written somewhere else in the code. There is no way to log it. The biggest thing is that you cannot decorate it, and by decorating it you cannot access the loop as an entity in your program. Functions can be accessed by name, but you cannot access a loop, right? So that is one very bad thing. If you write APIs, you know that decoration gets you a lot of things. Another thing is you cannot do an early exit. You can do continue, but that assumes that you are using only one loop. For example, if you were to write something like for request response in, if you write something like this, and God forbid you have another loop inside it for I in range 10, right? There is no way for you to decide if I is greater than 10, break big loop. There is no way for you to do this without considerably complicating your code simply to do an early exit, right? So that's the reason these kinds of systems are not prevalent everywhere. Clearly defining the problem tells you what all things cannot be done, right? Another thing is that we learn from that ORM example is that things that are forced, they break down faster, right? Which is why you should not depend on undefined behavior and uh, other parts of the system which are forced, which are hacks. For example, here I cannot actually write from. I have to use this cheat, right? Because from is a keyword in Python and it wouldn't be valid Python syntax if I wrote that. That's the only reason I cannot write from here, right? And so we quickly see that this system starts breaking down as soon as we start adding more and more cases to it, which is why warrants exist, which is why this is not the standard way of doing things. Right? So it's always better to go with systems which are built for a certain use case, or which are built with robustness in mind. The simpler is better. Okay. Mm, and then a solution to a problem is not a good solution until it solves all cases instead of just special ones. For example, in this job task thing, we don't even consider tasks which cannot be broken into batches. A classic example is a neural network. You cannot break down the calculation of a neural network. It has to run in those steps and it has to run completely before you get an output. You cannot return partial outputs. And while you're doing this, you truly cannot serve another request. It appears that you can, but you cannot, because you're not using threads, you're not using a separate process, it's all in the same thing. So this is not increasing your throughput in any fashion, it's just a hack. So whenever looking for solutions, we need to consider things that work everywhere instead of just one place. I think that's it. There are a lot of other weird cases, but those are mostly to do with how Python handles things instead of what we can do with it. There is a very interesting use case that I did not think of entering here. Almost everyone has heard of the go to statement. There was something called the come from statement. I don't know if anyone has heard of it. Basically, you do things like say X or label X, and then you do I equals to 1, B equals to 2, come from X, right? And then you just do print 1. So this part of the code never actually executes because every time you hit X, you just jump here. It's the reverse of a go-to statement. Another example of things that are probably better left alone, right? Weird ways of doing things. So that's all I have for you. If you have questions, I would love to hear them. This is a discussion oriented talk, so please go ahead. The SoWrong thing is just, I'll just show it to you. It's not a module, it's just a collection of files for each example. So, for example, in the ORM thing, SoWrong is a file that uh, this is the code. What SoWrong does is it will inspect the function, find an annotation with SQL in it, and then just parse that. Nice question, Manav. There's no clear reason for why to do this. It's just fun and trying to push what we understand. That's it. Uh, this is, yeah, that's the whole point. I mean, how strange, I do not kid you. I have seen this code in production. Wait, let me show you X5. I have seen people writing functions like this kind of a function definition and call is this is production code. I'm not kidding you. People do this. Oh, sorry, not the definition. They just call it like that. So yeah, I mean, I think the SQL interface is probably fresh or intuitive. It is, but then it has its problems, right? For example, if I do all of these SQL statements have to clear the Python parser. That's the big problem. I mean, it's very clearly obvious here where you have keywords conflicting with SQL keywords. So yeah, that's there. But yeah, I think other than that, it would be pretty cool. Uh, it's a nice way of writing it. I don't know how auto formatting systems will uh, take to this. For example, I have formatting turned off over here. If I, but it's still okay. Annotations have keywords which are in namespace. Define ABCD pass. Let me just. So this is what you pasted, right? Mm, A can be anything. Yeah, I think that's valid. So we can try and run this. It doesn't have any meaning attached to it, but it's valid. So no issues. I think annotation is actually what is used in systems like what's that thing called? Fast API. So you end up writing code like you can have things like this where you have an OTP and this thing is supposed to be a table, right? You can have annotations defining classes for things. So that kind of thing is valid. Mm, cool. Folder. How are your folder names images? Uh, they're not. Oh, are you talking about this penguin thing?
Yeah.
Uh, my actual folder name is this thing. So, for
So
example, it changes based on the prefix. So if I go to I love D, that's my folder name. And then if I go to so wrong, I have I love D dot so wrong, right? And then if I go to, it's just in my bash RC.
okay, so what font are you using for this?
This is just Unicode,
I mean,
normal Unicode. I don't
also
know what
Unicode.
font.
Okay,
Ah,
so okay, thanks for that.
yeah. I have a bash RC if you, I can post a link to that in the group.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? This is really maybe people did not get the chance to see the. I'm really proud of the web thing. This was a pain to get to work, but it was really cool to get to work. So also, please send. What's that? I don't. Okay.
That is
Yeah.
just a joke. He meant that
Yeah. Yeah. I
this
get it. I get it.
weird.
I bleach. Yeah. Okay. So That was it, I guess. There is a project to have come from and go to implemented in Python, but I did not want to traumatize people, so I didn't include that. But yeah, you have this. It's a cool project implementation wise, but okay. What inspired you to think like that? I mean, nothing. I was just walking through the C Python code and I figured, ki, oh wow, it does not actually evaluate. So the ORM example came first, this thing, where it said that it doesn't actually evaluate this thing. So you can have, for example, something very weird that is a byproduct of this. Let's say you have X and you do 1 by 0, you don't even need to do anything else. That does not even a function. That does not, that should not, wait, do I need the function? Yeah, I think I need the function. That should not blow up. Yeah. So annotations inside functions are not. Oh no, it wasn't quarantine. This was, I think, last
Uh,
year's talk.
okay, so this is a little weird. Inside a function, it is not evaluating that, but if it is not wrapped inside a function, it is evaluating the annotation.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, there was a switch between. There was some code which was related to scoping,
Uh,
and that's what
yeah.
did the thing. I
Are
don't
you on
remember correctly.
3.8? Are you on 3.8 by any chance? Or 3.9 RC?
I don't think so. Oh, ये क्या था? Sorry.
टैग वर्जन ये गलती मेरे से बहुत बार होती है
369.
दिस
Three six
शुड
nine is
नॉट
the
बी
stable one on my system.
I'm not sure about that, but that is a really cool thing that that I learned today.
Yeah, I mean, I've used it for all sorts of junk. This is just me leaving notes in the system, which I can then track later on. Uh, but these are all personal projects, so nobody else is looking at it, so I can live with my sins, right? Okay,
Can an
I
annotation have lambda expression in it, or any kind of Python expression?
I think it can. There's nothing as long as it is parsable, it's fine.
Define parsable.
Anything that is valid Python. So, for example, mm, yeah, what is invalid Python? Invalid Python would be
Because on annotation, everything invalid you write, let it be junk or anything, that will be passed as an annotation. That really does not mean anything in this case. What I'm asking
for
is, if you are
example,
writing valid Python, like a lambda
yeah,
expression or something, will that be passed?
yeah, I think so. It will. Let's try it out. That's a good one. Let's say lambda x times 2. It will not be evaluated. So there's nothing that's going to come out of this. But there's no reason it won't run. Yeah, so it runs fine.
Oh, again weird. All right, because when you are doing the SQL thing, you clearly said you were not able to use from the keyword from, because it is already in the namespace. Or let's reiterate, it is already a Python keyword, a valid Python keyword. But in this case, you have a valid, like your whole string was a valid Python keyword. So
I can't use it because the usage of from is
okay,
restricted to certain
okay.
things. So
I was a little bit
yeah,
confused. Okay. Hmm.
I think this will work. No, it won't work. Okay, maybe this will work. No. So yeah, the usage of from is restricted, so I can't use that. But otherwise, anything valid is fair game.
One more thing. So you can write valid expression in a type annotation. So Define a variable in a type annotation and give that variable a type annotation.
I don't think you can do that. Nested annotations are allowed. I don't know.
I also don't know. Maybe we can try.
So why Z? Yeah, I think this should. I might have to add bases to it. Yeah. No, I can't do that. Annotations are fun to play around with, but you can just attach this one more piece of information to things. I mean, this is valid.
I just can't stop but imagining how will pydentic or typing library इस समय क्या होगा whenever you try to use typing objects or pydentic objects तो उस
Mhm.
केस में क्या होगा things will blow up or they will blow up quite good I really do not know I will try this after this talk. I will
Sure.
try that.
Cool. So
Okay, so do
I'll
we
just
have any more questions? You were saying something.
I'll post the link to this in the chat. Copy link. Oh, what? Never mind that.
Do we have any more questions? Maybe it's beyond Zul. You can check on YouTube chat if we have questions over there.
So,
No, we don't have any question on YouTube.
Okay, so Arjun, do you have any more thing, anything else to add?
no, I think that's it. It's enough to digest for one day.
Okay, so all right. Thank you, Arjun, for this talk, and thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you everyone on YouTube who joined us. Thank you everyone who on Jitsi who joined us. Thank you everyone.